Hello Internet, it's your pal Joey T from the Cartoon.P. I apologize, it is Saturday, and you guys are probably wondering where's the latest Cartoon Palooza review. As you may have noticed with this month, I was overcoming a really bad flu, which is why last week's video was so postponed. And as far as this week, just very busy with work, so I wasn't able to put together my Halloween review, which was expected to be Frankenweenie, so hopefully I'll get it done by next week. Granted, it's going to be in November, but hey, a little bit closer to Halloween, so I guess it's still appropriate. But I did want to make this video because this is a response to some recent news in regards to The Simpsons, a show that I have not been following lately. A show that I have not been following lately. Sorry about that. I don't even know if I'm going to edit this video. But basically, they're going to be removing the character, or as most reports are saying, one of the producers on the show officially announced that they're going to be removing the character Apu, not in a big way. Apparently, in the same article, they tried to make an episode addressing the issue with Apu, but it was rejected, and that ultimately they're just going to silently have the character out of Springfield. I'm thinking that this was an episode to explain why he's leaving Springfield, which to me seems like a better option, but lately, with a lot of the decisions the Simpsons have been making with Apu, it only seems appropriate in their way. In my opinion, I think it's a horrible idea. I think there was a lot going for the character. He's one of my favorite characters on the show, as with many people who watch The Simpsons. But I will say that there are reasons why this controversy began. Let me just state that way before any of this, I'd say maybe about 6 months ago, there was a documentary on True TV. I forgot the comedian's name, but he made a documentary talking about the issues of Apu as a character on The Simpsons. I have not seen the documentary, but I was kind of hesitant about watching it. Maybe I'll watch it. Maybe I'll even review it at some point. But all I can say is I was kind of hesitant about it for a couple of reasons. One, I always never felt Apu was never a racist character. I never felt he was portrayed to paint Indians or South Asians in a negative light. But then I really thought about it. And I'm playing devil's advocate on this one. And based on what many people have argued about Apu, and I guess it's only appropriate that I talk about racism in animation since I've kind of spent the last two Cartoon Palooza reviews talking about racism in animation, there are two things in Apu's character that do make it seem that he is a racist stereotype, and it's the accent and the fact that he owns the Quickie Mart. I'll talk about that. I'll say that when it comes to racism, and I've been stressing this with my last two videos, when it comes to racist portrayals in animation, the idea of it is that it's painting a race in a negative light. A lot of people have talked about how The Simpsons in general have a lot of negative stereotypes, but they're played up for laughs, so it makes no sense for Apu to be singled out. But let's be real, amongst all those stereotypes, they're all Caucasian-based or ethnic stereotypes, so I never really bought into that argument. Making fun of Italians, well, we're white people, so... And I mean, that's the issue when it comes to racism. There's ethnic stereotypes, and then there's racist stereotypes, and Apu's lining up with being a racist stereotype, and the idea of racism is that it's based on class, just the idea of discrimination against something as physical as race. And I mean, being an ethnic stereotype, it's different because an Italian guy is as anybody. You could even have a black Italian guy. You know, it doesn't really matter. That's the difference. I mean, I could go into detail, but this is me just going off unscripted. But all I could say is that with Apu, there are qualities about him that fit the negative stereotypes that fall into racism versus ethnic stereotypes. And either way, ethnic stereotypes can be tricky too. So I'm not saying that that's completely. I'm not excusing ethnic stereotypes by saying that. With Apu, there's the accent. As the character, there was a very great video about this controversy regarding Apu, and this is how I always felt about it too. Is that Apu is an Indian American. He's a first generation Indian coming into America, so it's obvious that he's gonna still hold traditions and values and the accent, because he's probably still speaking, I believe it was Hindi, you know, as something that he's proud of. And I mean, as someone whose mother is a first generation immigrant, I guess she speaks for that. My mom's a first generation Lebanese American. She's a proud American, but she's also a proud Lebanese woman. I mean, she has a thick accent. She does follow the customs and traditions, but she also respects that she's an American. But when you have the accent, because the idea behind it too is that when Hank Azaria was coming up with the voice for Apu, they pretty much told him to make the funniest accent he can come up with, and he did that in line with all the characters that he was playing. So in his mind, it was no different. And from what many Indian people have said, it's kind of gone both ways, where it's like it doesn't really help, but at the same time, a lot of Indian people that I know have said that it's actually a testament to the character and the fact that they believed there was an Indian person being the voice of Apu in the first place. But that's where it kind of lies in something that can be discriminatory, and I could see why people can be offended by it. Like, for a lot of people who know the character of Apu, there's the catchphrase, "Thank you, come again," that for a lot of people have used in teasing manner, and in the documentary, it's in one of the clips that shows that was like the point of ridicule for the guy creating the documentary. And I'm just gonna say straight out, bullying's wrong. It's a fact of life for most of us to have to deal with, but it's still wrong. But the one thing that I think is more offensive than even the accent, and not nearly as excusable as the accent, is the fact that he's an Indian man owning a convenience store, which has kind of been ingrained with, like, you know, the Indian guy who owns the gas station or the convenience store. That's the negative stereotype. And to me, I could see how people can be offended by that, because as a lot of Indian Americans go, there's more than just Indians owning convenience stores. You know, it's more than that. So I can see people being obviously offended by that. I will say, though, as a character, it's weird, because the Kwik-E-Mart, if they're going to get rid of Apu, that means they're going to have to do something with the Kwik-E-Mart, which is going to seem odd, because as a character, I'm saying that as a character, the Kwik-E-Mart is a setting, but it also feels like a character, and without Apu, it's going to feel empty. So in some ways, by taking that away, you take away from the character, and that's really why I think this is a bad decision for the Simpsons to be doing in the first place, is that there's a lot going for Apu. Like, people have stressed that he's like one of the smartest people in the city. I think about the Simpsons movie, the scene where three people go to Mr. Burns when they cut out all the electricity in the city, and there's the police force, the medical force, and then there's Apu. That's almost like saying we're relying on 3 people to represent Springfield to ask Mr. Burns to help share the electricity. That was a big deal, you know, and it shows value that Apu matters to people. In some ways, it's funny too, because he's the one who tells Mr. Burns to listen to his heart, and it really speaks to what Apu is all about. Is that he's really the voice of reason in the show, and especially with Homer. I think about that episode. I think it was the one where James Woods replaces Apu for a role. So I will find it funny, though, if they end up doing that. I mean, it will be funny, but it'll be interesting, because James Woods kind of this crazy conservative dude now, so I don't know how that's going to work out. But all I can say is, without Apu on The Simpsons, it's going to feel empty. And going off the point that, you know, there was the episode where Homer and Apu, he gets kicked out of the Kwik-E-Mart, so he tries to find purpose in his life, as being like one of my favorite episodes, and it's a great Apu episode in general. Also, on top of the fact that while people talk about the racism of Apu, I mean, let's give some credit to the fact that as a character, Apu kind of shared knowledge about the Hindi culture that most people didn't know at the time. So in some ways, it was kind of like sharing more about the culture. Yeah, from a show written by, as the show's quoted, Harvard-educated white people in the writer's room. But, you know, I just think it's weird. I think it's odd. I think it's strange the way they're approaching this, because I kind of hinted it, but I'll bring it up now. In response to the documentary, there was an episode of The Simpsons where Lisa literally looks at the camera and says that what we're doing makes no sense, that people are going to be offended now, when at the time we created it, it wasn't a big deal. So a lot of people took offense to that as just like The Simpsons taking a negative approach to it. But in some sense, I kind of agree to that. I mean, at the time this was being creative, there weren't a lot of Indian characters on TV. And for a lot of people, that's also the problem, is that of all the Indian representations in media, it had to be Apu, which, as I mentioned before in slight detail, there are debatably racist qualities about him. But that shouldn't undermine the fact that he is still a really good character. You know, computer science doctorate, right? He's technically a doctor, and he's also one of the hottest people in the city, as discussed in one of the episodes. And a fifth Beatle. Let's not forget that too. He's a fifth Beatle. So I mean, like, the fact that they're gonna take away a character that was so ingrained to the creation and the success of The Simpsons, to me, is just kind of disappointing because, you know, I've talked about racism in animation, and I've talked about why there are problems and there are things we can learn from. But when you are just taking it away and just saying, like, by having Apu removed because you don't want to deal with the controversy, don't you think that means you're just trying to hide something? Whereas it's kind of understandable that you talk about the decision behind it, you kind of discuss it. And I think that's what made the earlier seasons of The Simpsons so great, was that when it tackled issues, it was about it was within the story, but it was about talking about it and having a sense of understanding of why they're doing it versus just doing something. That's very evident as to why this new seasons of The Simpsons is definitely not comparable, because it's literally, at this point, The Simpsons on TV is not the same Simpsons as it was in the past. Most people have embraced it, but at this point, it's not the same show. And the fact that they're removing Apu only testifies to the fact that it's not the same show as it was when it was first created. I don't think that's great because it takes away from the identity of the show. I mean, but at the same time, I can understand the reason why they did it, the reason of the decision behind doing it. But at the same time, I don't think it was a good decision. I just think that this is going to, in fact, cause more controversy as I go on Twitter. Either this is a silent minority, but it seems like most people, even Indian people as well, are kind of against the idea of just having Apu taken away in general. So that's my thoughts. Let me know in the comments section what you think. It's always fun making these videos. I wish I could have put a little bit more time in this, but stuff comes in the way. Joey T, thanks for watching, and have a great day. Take care.